Lotio units will win or lose you most of the battles. They are pretty cheap, so you can really easily bring a lot of them. So knowing which Lotio units to bring and why is very important. First we got the Lotio units of most barbarian factions. The Celtic Warriors and the Gallic Warriors of Carthage are very similar. One got more melee attack and one got more melee defense. Melee attack is more important in this case, so that's why the Celtic Warriors are above the Celtic Warriors. The Glacian Swords got even better stats than these two units, for only 30 more cost. So that's why the Glacian Swords is higher rated. The Glacian Swords of Egypt are better than the Glacian Swords of Glacia in combat, but they have 10 less armor and they cost 100 more. It's a 470 cost unit, which is way too much for a Lotio unit. So this unit is a fucking scam, so you belong at strong. The Iceni Swordband is definitely more cost effective than the Glacian Swords of Egypt for 340, but they are definitely the weakest of these other 3 units, so they belong at the bottom. This video is sponsored by FightMe. Nope, I don't have a sponsor, but I want to keep on making these videos which you guys seem to be enjoying, but they take a lot of time, especially now I try to make 2 videos a week. So I want to ask you guys for some support with channel membership. It will help me out a lot making these videos. You can support me for $1 a month. Every single support will be greatly appreciated. And as a thank you for the support, you also unlock some perks, like early access. That's like the minimal I can give you guys back, but I want to keep on making these videos and growing our special community. So much love to everyone, especially to the supporters. Now let's jump right back to the video. So I don't know if a lot of you guys knew this, but the mercenary Thracian warriors of Macedon cost 80 more, compared to the normal Thracian warriors, which have exactly the same stats. So this is a definitely scam, but it's still a decent unit, and it's also good against large. And the normal Thracian warriors are obviously above them. The Foxman isn't a bad unit, but for 100 more, I would pick the Thracian warriors over them, so that's why they're just under them, but still above the 500 cost Thracian warrior. Now we got the 4 Gladiators units of Rome. These are basically some meme units for Rome to play around with, but they're not that bad, so I still have to put them at lacking. The swords over the spears, and the men over the women. That's just facts. But I'm not a misogynist like Andrew Tate. You can look at the stats. The stats will prove it, you just got to look at CA for this. Now we got obviously the fan favorite, the Pila units. And from these 4, the Levi First Spears of Ardia are definitely the best. So they belong to God tier, but still under these 4. A 360 cost unit with 5 Pila rounds, decent charge, counter carry tactics, and 65 armor is just a great unit. The Levi First Spears are basically the same but worse, and cost 20 more. But they still have to be at God tier. Same thing with the Karen Axemen. Cost more, but they're less strong. And that forces me to put them at the top of strong. The Gorilla Spears of Lustani cost also 400 like the Karen Axemen, but are worse and got lower armor. So I would have to rate them under the Karen Axemen. But they're still handy because they have Gorilla deployment. The Barbarian X Warriors are actually not that bad. They are more stable than the Celtic Warriors because they have more armor, but they're less cost effective, and that's why I have to put them at the top of strong. The Nabatean X Warriors are stats wise very close to the X Warriors of the Barbarian factions, but they cost 490 instead of 470, and they are worse than the X Warriors, so that's why I have to put them behind them. The RDI X-Men is a shit unit. The only nice thing they have is Gorilla deployment, and that's why they deserve decent, otherwise never. But yeah, at the bottom of decent. Now we got the Militia Hoplites. I still see so many people using these Militia Hoplites. I really don't understand why. They are shit. They can't kill anything. You should really never bring them, and that's why I have to put them at lacking. Although the late Libyans are not a bad unit, because they have 300 armor, and that makes them pretty useful. So at the bottom of decent. The normal Libyans are for 30 less, basically a Militia Hoplite. Next up we got the 3 different Hillmen. We got the basic Hillman for 220, which is a decent unit. It's very useful because it got 2 Pilar rounds. The Bactrian Hillman is for 260, even better, but the best one is the Illyrian X-Men for 270, which is definitely worth your bucks. Now we got the good Lotio Swords with also Pila. These are very cost effective. I would have to rate the Egyptians because they're not amazing for their cost in combat at strong. The Club Levy at God tier because they're very strong in combat, and the Khushai Slave Infantry at the bottom of God tier. Next up we got the low tier pikemen. If you should bring any pikemen, I would suggest bringing the low tier pikemen because they can do the same job as the mid tier and the high tier pikes, just block off a street as long as they don't get shot. The Nabatean pikemen for 400 cost is a decent unit. The Egyptians have a better stat though. The Levy pikemen are in the middle of them, and the Spartan pikemen needs to be at lacking. They're just for the price not strong. Now we got the very cheap low tiers without Pila. They can be useful to put on the walls or just to have as a battle body, but they can't be at strong or god tier, so they have to be at decent, and I would say at the bottom of decent. They're just useful sometimes. But I would have to rate the Khushite slaves at the bottom of strong. For 140, they're the cheapest mob unit in the game, so that's why still cost effective. Next up we got 3 really shit hoplites all around the same cost, which is 440. From these 3, the Nabatean is the best, afterwards the Persian, and behind the Persian hoplite, the light hoplite. I don't have to say much, these are the stats of them, they're just shit. But this hoplite makes it even worse. Costs 510 and is even worse than these units, and it's just so bad for the price. So definitely at the bottom of CA. Next up we got the Iberian Swords and the Lustani Swords women. The Iberian Swords is definitely better than the Lustani Sword women. I would have to rate it under the Axemen. With 5 strong Pila Volleys, it's just a really strong unit. And the Lustani Swords women, which don't have 5 Pila Volleys, will be under the Egyptian Swords. Next up we got the 3 different naked swords in this game. The one from Arverni and Boyai, which costs 580, is just not cost effective. I would really put it at the bottom of decent. The Glacian one costs 480. It's a little bit more cost effective, but still at the bottom of decent. And the Pontic Mercenary Nakeds cost 380. So every time the cost decreases with 100. And these are actually pretty cost effective. I would have to rate them near the Lustani Swordsmen, and I will put it above them. And you can judge them yourself with the stats on the screen. Now we got 3 pretty strong units. First we got the Estari, 100% at God tier. I have to put them under the Celtic and Gallic Warriors, but that's just a personal opinion. But you could definitely rank it under the Glacian Swords. The Numidian Light Infantry is also not a bad unit. It has gorillas, so it's really useful, and that's why I have to rate it above the Icenian Swordband and under the Estari. The Italian Swords are actually also not that bad. Pretty good melee attack and melee damage with a good amount of armor for 400 cost, so I would have to rate them above the Axemen. Next up we got 12 really cheap spears under the cost of 240, which all don't have Pila, which are pretty useful as your mob, and most of the times got also 45 armor. And that's why I have to rate them also above the swords, because they're also effective against cavalry, and they're still a decent unit to bring. Next up we got 3 different units with special abilities, 80 men count, and the cost between 500 and 600. The Hexbearer is most useful of them all. I would have to rate them above the spears, because they have scare and they have ability which debuffs the enemy unit's morale around them. So a very effective unit. The Sobek Cultist got scare and encourage as a static ability. In my opinion they're still worth to bring, but they're not very special or something. And I find the Druidic Noble one with the most cost the least effective one. For 580 it got encourage and the ability which boosts the morale of the units around them, which I just don't find worth it. Next up we got the cheap Lotio Spears, but this time with Pila. These are 100% worth your bucks. The Swaby one costs 220. I do want to put it at God tier together with the Larry Freeman. They are just very strong units. Also very effective to counter cavalry, but you got to know that this is a scam. This one has Galatia only, I think. It costs 70 more, 280, and the stats of this unit is even worse than the Larry Freeman. So that's a 100% scam, and this goes all the way at the bottom to CA. What did you do with this unit? The Iberian Spears are also very cost effective. It costs 200 only, 30 bonus versus cavalry, just a very nice unit. The only problem is that it doesn't have a lot of armor, and that's why I have to put it behind the Egyptians. The Khushai Spirits got also Pila and are decent, but they cost 280, which I find a little bit too expensive, and that's why I have to put it all the way down here. Next up we've got the Sabian Swords and the Nabatean Swords. These are both strong units. I would have to rate them above the Ex-Warriors, but the Nabatean Swords are more cost effective than the Sabian Swords, and you can see this by the stats right now on your screen. Now we got the overpriced low tier spear units. These belong all to CA. What have you done with these units? They cost around 500 and are just not worth it for your bucks. I see a lot of times people bring the Caravan Guard, but there's nothing special with them. The only thing is that they got far range for their Pila, but it's still a pretty shit unit. Now we got 2 Gorilla units. The Nervion one is actually not that bad. I would have to definitely rate it at decent, and maybe even at the top of decent. For 580 it's a pretty stable unit, and it got Gorilla. But the Gutali Tribesmen are just not that good. I would have to rate them where the Gladiators are, but I do have to rate them above them. Now we got the Spears, which cost around 300 and 350, but definitely got more armor than the 200 to 250 cost units. The Sabi one is pretty cost effective. I would still always bring the cheap Spears because it's cheap and they can do the same thing, but these guys can tank a little bit more. The Sabians at the front, afterwards the Getae ones. In front of the Getae ones, the Roman ones. The Italian Spears a little bit behind though, because they're not great. The Sparta one, which costs 280, is also not that bad for a battle body. Iceni one also definitely at the bottom, even behind the Italians. The Getae one is also pretty damn trash, and this one also costs pretty much. And now we got the Khushai Spear, which costs 400 and got 2 Pila Volleys. Lacking would be a little bit too rough for him. I will put him at decent, but definitely at the bottom of decent. The Bloodsworn is a very strong unit. This one has to be at strong or even at God tier. Yeah, I have to rate it at God tier because it's such a strong unit, but the only weakness is their armor. But if it doesn't get shot, it can decimate units. Now we got the Round Shield Swordsman, which isn't a bad unit. It definitely belongs as strong, but in the strong category I'll put it behind the Glacian Swords. If you compare their stats, the Glacian Sword is definitely more cost effective, even though they cost 20 more. And the Khushai Swordsman will have to be also as strong and behind the Round Shield. And there we go, this is the whole tier list. It doesn't fit on the screen actually, but I will download it and put it now on the screen totally, so you can judge it a little bit. Let me know if you agree with this tier list. If you enjoy these videos and want to support me, become a member. That would be really awesome. I would really appreciate that. And if you want to see more of these ranking videos, watch the high tier ranking, which I did last time. And I will see you guys over there.